phone. Okay, so we would go on to the next speaker, who is Dr. JasonTurpin. He's a senior biologist and evaluator at Health Canada, and he's located in Ottawa. He did his undergraduate degree in biochemistry from the University of Ottawa and a PhD from McGill University, again in biochemistry, where he characterized and developed a preclinical model of HB2-driven breast cancer. So, Dr. Turpin, you can now start your talk.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Let's see if I can share my screen here. All right, where are we? Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So I first wanted to say good afternoon and thank you very much for the organizers for the opportunity to talk with everybody today and kind of give you an idea a little bit of a career path that, you know, honestly, it had not really occurred to me until much closer to the end of my studies. It's sort of a unique field for me, and it opened up a lot of, opened up my eyes to a lot of what's out there in the industry. So, as was mentioned in the introduction, my name is JasonTurpin. I got my PhD from McGill University in 2015. I was working at the Goodman Cancer Center under the supervision of Dr. William Muller. And so following my PhD studies, I got an opportunity to go to work at Health Canada, where I've been for the last 5 years. Now, initially, I started as a biologist, sort of a BI3, and that's your entry level for people with graduate degrees. And then a couple of years later, I advanced to the position that I'm in now as a senior biologist. So what do we do at Health Canada? As a senior biologist, I'm a quality reviewer, and I work for the Biologics and Radiopharmaceuticals Drug Directorate. And our role is in the regulation of biologic drugs, vaccines, blood products, cell and gene therapies, tissues, organs, radiopharmaceuticals. So we review them in many different contexts. We review clinical trial applications, we review new drugs as they're coming onto market, as well as reviewing the drugs that are currently on the market. And in my position, I also have the opportunity to contribute internationally to establishing policy around different types of drug regulations. Now, specifically what we're doing is we're reviewing the manufacturing process of biologic drugs, which is actually quite similar to what you're going to see or what you've experienced working in a wet lab. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of computer. So just like quickly, how did I get here? As I was getting towards the end of my graduate studies, I had to take a long, hard look at where I was at and where I wanted to go and what factors were important to me. And I also had to be realistic about my opportunities. Postdoc, was that something I was interested in? I mean, everything we've heard so far from people working in an academic research setting, it's a very exciting, very interesting field. But when I looked at myself realistically, I found that I probably lacked the required passion, and that I wasn't sure I was willing to put in the effort and the commitment that was required in order to get me to that point. So I started looking around at other potential career opportunities, and being born and raised in Ottawa, government work is something that we're quite familiar with. It is the main industry here in Ottawa. Now, I had a lot of preconceived notions about what exactly government work would be like. And it turns out that I was absolutely wrong about a lot of those preconceived notions. So what I ended up doing, I think probably the most important thing that got me started on this career path was that I used my network to start asking questions, start talking to people who work in and around government. What kind of work is there? What kind of opportunities are there for people with a similar background to mine? And what I ended up realizing was that the opportunities are actually really diverse. Many different departments in the government employ people with a science background, specifically with a graduate degree. So then came, where did I start? So the first thing I did was I applied for an external BI3 competition. Now, as I mentioned before, this is an entry level for people with graduate degrees. A lot of the BI3 positions, it's a master's degree is the minimum, and in a lot of cases, a PhD is preferred. So you have to demonstrate that you have the appropriate education and experience, that you meet the knowledge requirements, and you have to pass an interview. And once I did that, I was one of the successful applicants, and I was entered into a qualified pool. Now, most of the time when you apply for these jobs in the government, you are applying to a general pool. And from there, once you've been in a qualified pool, your name may come out and you may receive either another request for an interview or a potential job offer. And these competitions can take anywhere from 6 to 12 months to complete, and they remain active for about 2 years. So just because you got into a pool doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be chosen from it right away, but it may happen in the future. So my biggest take home from this is to be patient. So some of the pros and cons about working in the government, it's very different, I think, from, well, there are a lot of differences with working in the bench, but there are some similarities. So part of the government work that I enjoyed the most, and this was one of the aspects that was important to me when I was trying to decide where I wanted to go, was having a work-life balance. Evenings and weekends are mine, and they're mine to spend with my family. And these are things that, you know, as I was reflecting where I wanted to go with my career, as I was ending my PhD, this was something that kind of came back to me as something that was important. So that was one of the factors that I had to consider when I was looking around for a new job. Job satisfaction. In my current position, I'm working with a highly educated team. We're a mixture, as mentioned, of people with master's degrees, PhDs, medical doctors. So is a highly educated, scientifically stimulating group. We're a science-based, risk-based review team, and our recommendations are made based on scientific evidence. So we're able to weigh pros and cons and make our recommendation based on what the science says. I also find it very motivating that we do make a direct contribution to the health of Canadians. I've been involved in approving a large number of clinical trials, drug approvals for new drugs on the market, ensuring the safety and consistency of the drugs that are manufactured. And we're also playing a very important role in the COVID response. So from that, there is that added enthusiasm or the added motivation that we are making a direct impact on the health of Canadians. And then finally, job security. And one of the benefits of working for the government is that when you achieve an indeterminate position, the job security is definitely a nice part of it. Now, some of the cons to the work, I guess if I compare back to life as a graduate student, you know, I was fortunate and I was able to attend many different conferences and travel to different places. There's a lot less travel in this type of work. We do a lot of computer-based work, so it's not quite as physically dynamic as it would be in a lab where you spend some time at the bench, some time working on your computer. It's a lot of computer-based work. We're in a lot more of a reactive position than proactive. And when I say that, I more mean that it's not curiosity-based research. It's more when the pharmaceutical companies want to market a drug in Canada, they submit us the data, we review the data, but then we turn around and ask questions. So we more react to what they've given us and try to ensure that we have all the information to make our decision, and less of what is probably more experienced in an academic wet lab-based setting where you're more driving your own research. And one of the other things I had to consider when I was looking at transitioning from the lab to, I guess, a non-academic stream is what skills had I obtained throughout my studies that were translatable from the lab to the reviewer desk. Obviously, you know, knowledge of biological processes is quite important, but it's not the technical skills like, hey, I can run a Western blot. It's more of the theoretical concept around the principles behind that technique and how you might apply it to different situations, understanding the principles behind cell culture and protein biochemistry, different chromatographic techniques and analytical methods. So this was taking the wet lab experience and looking more from an informational theoretical perspective. There's also looking at risk assessment. So understanding that the significance, something being statistically significant does not necessarily mean it's important, and understanding the difference behind that. Critical analysis is something that I think all researchers have done, or it's an important skill that all researchers need. And in the job that I'm doing now, it's also, okay, what data has been made available to us and what is missing in order to answer some of the questions? And it's being able to analyze that data and then effectively ask questions that will get you the answers you want. We do a lot of report writing. So how to, not only how to write a report, but how to be very clear and concise in your writing. Include only the important information and make your point and get out. Long, flowery texts are nice, but they're not really useful in government work. And then there's also a really big part that is just curiosity. It's being able to sift through the data, ask questions about things that might or might not be there, understanding where the holes in the data are and how to ask questions to get more information. And these are just sort of your general skill sets that I found translated well from working in the lab to the reviewer desk, but a lot of the more practical review skills are required on the job. So I touched a little bit on this before, but what kind of jobs are available to science graduates? In the health science setting in particular, this is more of just, this is not an exhaustive list, but this was more off the top of my head. Different government departments that I do know are looking for people with advanced degrees in health science. Obviously, Health Canada does a lot of this work. Public Health Agency of Canada, CFIA, Environment Canada, National Research Council is a lot more of the research-based, pardon me, the lab-based work. But what was surprised to me is actually the Department of National Defense and CSIS also hire people with scientific, with health science backgrounds for some of their work. And these types of jobs, and again, not an exhaustive list, but just to give you an idea of what types of jobs are out there, you have your traditional research or regulatory research-based positions, but then you also have people in a reviewer position, like I am. So working as either a chemist or a biologist to review the manufacturing of drugs. You have the clinical and non-clinical reviewers who are looking at more of the clinical trial, clinical data supporting the drug applications. And then we also employ a large number of statisticians that help support all the research work. On top of the sort of heavy duty reviewer work, we also do employ people who are shaping the health policy. And they also need to have a health science background to understand how to shape and influence the policy. And we also do employ inspectors and people who understand the lab environment and who are able to go on site and inspect the drug companies. And how do you get into a position within the government? Patience, patience, patience. Jobs.gc.ca is the website that is the repository for all external positions. And if anyone is interested in this type of career, just note that most job postings that you're going to see are to qualify a pool of candidates, but that's okay. The more pools you get into, the better chance you have of getting into the government. These often staff a limited number of positions, but can be used to staff positions at later dates. And even if you don't get the specific job that you're after, just being in a qualified pool is a large advantage. Just when you're a tip for when you are applying for these jobs, be extremely clear in how you meet the essential criteria that are listed in the job postings. For the by 3 competition from a couple of years ago, we had over 500 applications from people with masters and PhDs and postdocs. And out of those 500 applications, people have to sift through them and decide who is actually eligible. So the more clear and obvious you are about how you meet the essential criteria, the more likely you're going to be to move forward in the pool. Also, using keywords within your answers will help you highlight you as a potential candidate. If you're ambiguous at all, it's probably not going to help your cause. And when you answer all the questions in the application, we suggest using the STAR method. So situation, task, action, and result. You can look, this is a pretty common method. You can look it up online, but this is a very useful tool for helping you advance in your application within the government. And a big thing too is also to be open-minded. So even if the job isn't even the first job you get isn't your dream job, one unique aspect about government work is that moving around within the government is very easy to do. So getting in is the hard part, but once you're in there, the ability to move around is, it's definitely there. So something for people to consider as you're, ending your research career or ending your graduate studies and trying to decide where you're going to go. The big question is what's next? And my suggestion, my recommendation is take a really good hard look at where your interests lie. So what kind of work does interest you? And what are the factors that are important? Is academia something that very much interests you? And do you believe you have the capacity to get there? Or would you be more interested in working in industry for a drug company or within the government, or maybe there's another field? But be realistic about where you want to go and what you need to get there. Postdoc. Postdoc is often the natural transition after you finish your PhD, but you do have to ask yourself, will this help me achieve my future career goals? And from there, you can decide really what you think is going to be next. It was brought up in the previous talk about job location. Does the job location matter to you? As I mentioned, I'm born and raised in Ottawa, and my wife and I were in Montreal, and we had to decide where we wanted to go. And coming back to Ottawa was high up on the list, so it lined up quite well. But the location was very important for us, as was our lifestyle. We do like our family life. We do like the 9-to-5 work, and we like the lifestyle that the government work affords us. And these were really some of the obstacles that I had as I was trying to evaluate where I was and where I wanted to go as I was finishing my graduate studies. So some of the other things that I think are important to consider is identify your translatable skills. Not everyone's going to be good at everything, but try to look at where you think you're good at, where you think you excel, and be creative about it. And try to decide, okay, if you have a certain skill, how will this apply to other situations, and how can you convince a potential employer about how about your capacity and how you can help. Set attainable goals, and I say this to be realistic about your skills. Everyone here, I have no doubt, is highly intelligent, highly educated, and has a lot of talent. There are a lot of talented people out there too, and you have to know what sets you apart. But also be realistic about what your first job will be coming out of your graduate studies. If your first job is aiming to be an executive, that might be reaching a little far. I don't know for sure, but that might be a bit of a stretch. But be realistic and have that plan. Understand where you are, where you want to go, and what you need to do to get there. And remember that a plan is just a recipe for change. Just because you make a plan now doesn't mean you can't modify it 6 months from now or as you learn more. Entering the government can be a challenge, but the two biggest pieces of advice, if government work is something that interests you, networking is so important. Speaking to people, understanding what types of jobs are out there and where you can go with it, and persistence. Most people don't succeed in the first time they try to get into the government. It takes many, many applications to understand the process and understand what they're looking for. So be persistent. And with that, I will say thank you very much for the opportunity to speak and for your attention. And if anybody has any follow-up questions, I'll be around for that. And you can always send me an email, and I'd be happy to answer it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Turpin. It was